Spirit Radio Podcasts.
Of course, we're still very early on in the year. It's definitely not too late to put important things in place. And I think maybe one of the things you kind of said to yourself when you were thinking about 2016, yeah, I'd love to do a retreat, or I want to do something that's going to help me kind of just spend time with God, listen to God, what He wants in my life. And it's kind of the best laid plans, don't they, go off to ride, because it's something we say we'd love to do and all of a sudden the year passes and it hasn't happened. So now is the time that you kind of go, okay, when is the time I can do it? When is a weekend or a few days that I can take off to have a retreat? Maybe you're listening to me going, a retreat? First of all, I've never been on one. No clue what it would be like. Why would I go on one? Well, hopefully this next interview will help us with those questions. In studio to tell us a little bit more about the benefits of taking some time out to have a retreat, to spend some time with God. We've the Reverend Trevor Morrow, who is the chairperson of the Lucan Centre, with me in studio. How are you doing, Trevor? Thanks for coming in.
Well, good morning.
Should I call you the Rev Trev? I know the kids call you that.
Well, the kids call me that. I like being called the Rev Trev, actually.
You like that nickname?
Yeah,
That's good.
I do.
Well, listen, before we get into talking a little bit about retreats, tell us a bit about yourself first.
Well, I come from the north originally, as you can tell from my accent. Although I've lived, in Dublin and in Lucan for almost 32 years. This has been my world, my life. I suppose my primary skills are as a Bible teacher, communicator. But and how I got into retreats was because I am hyperactive. Like, I'm manic at times. You need
to be kind of busy and
I'm
doing stuff all the time.
Doing. And, you say you're doing this for God, and you are, of course, but you're just running around in a frenetic race from day to day, visiting people, preparing sermons, organising meetings. And I was even struggling to have one day off, even though it was commanded.
We're told to have a day of rest, right?
I know. But ministers don't at times. Clergy don't. Priests don't. It's disastrous.
Do you think that's something that a lot of people fall into that trap? And as you say, Trevor, we kind of go, but I'm doing all these good things and it's for a good reason. But as a priest said to me recently, he said, yeah, Wendy, they're all great. But if you're not taking time to rest with God, then you're bunched and they're all pointless anyway. And I kind of went, oh, okay. Why don't we kind of prioritise this resting time?
Well, I think because we are broken. We're messed up. And even though those of us who claim to know God or have some sort of relationship with God, we actually function in a world where our bodies, our minds, socially, even not just because of the choices we've made, but because of the choices other people have made, means we're screwed up. And so the balance and the rhythms of rest and work that mean that, how things ought to be are not our experience. Now, we can say that one day, when that which is perfect has come and love, is our true experience, and we have the beatific vision, all these wonderful things about the future, we can say, yeah, we'll have the eternal rest of the people of God. Those are the languages of the Bible. But obviously God has intended for us to have some of this now. And we need to learn how to do this. And it's one of the reasons I suppose got involved with the Lucan Centre, out of my own frustrations, my own inadequacies, of to know, how can I actually encounter God? How can I reconnect with Him in a way that makes sense? And is it suitable for my type of personality?
Yeah. So there's kind of resting time. A lot of people listening, they mightn't be kind of familiar with the concept of going on a retreat. What would you kind of see, or could you explain to us, Trevor, about like a typical personal retreat? What would that entail?
Well, when you talk about personal retreat, that implies that it's an individual thing. And the individualistic nature of our culture assumes that, this is what I need, this is the experiences I need for me and in terms of what I'm seeking after. I must tell you, I went on a sabbatical for the first time. I mean, it sounds crazy. Like, I must have been in my 50s at this stage. Like, how daft is this? And I was fortunate enough to go with this superstar in the spiritual world called Eugene Peterson, who, of course, wrote The Message, which is a modern translation of the Bible, and just a wonderful Christian leader. So I'm with him on my first day on this, quote, sabbatical retreat. He says to me, now, Trevor, what are your expectations of this retreat? And I thought, a pretty good answer. And I thought my answer was pretty good. I said, I want to have a fresh experience of God. I want to know Him better. I want greater sense of power. And I thought a pretty good answer. And he looked at me and said, well, Trevor, maybe it's God Himself you should be seeking after. And the reason he discerned immediately from me that apart from being frenetic, I'm also a bit of an experienced junkie, as most people are. And depending on which religious tradition you come from, like if you're Catholic, you know the sense of mystery. If you're Presbyterian like me, you know the sense of awe. If you're charismatic, the buzz. If you're Methodist, you like your heart strangely warmed. So you seek after this experience.
Do you think we can kind of fall into a trap or a temptation then where it becomes too much about feelings? You know, I don't feel connected to God right now, you know, so
Correct.
we don't persevere maybe through prayer or through just asking questions or trying to learn about our faith, and we can kind of get too attached to the kind of, I guess, the parts of our human nature that like to feel those things, you know.
Sure. And they're not unimportant.
Yeah.
It's really great to have all of those things. But when they become the primary focus, they can become almost like an idol that you seek after rather than God himself. Now, what happens at a retreat is that there are things put in place that enable you to actually connect with God himself, where the experiences may or may not flow, but they become secondary.
So what sort of stuff are you talking about?
So you're taught, for example, how to be quiet, how to have solitude, how to relate to other people in a way that is authentic. Now, when you're on a guided retreat, there are patterns and structures that are put in place, so that you know you don't have to sit and think, what am I going to do? What's meant to happen here? For example, this morning, I'll give you an example. What happened to me? I often would try and do my own, you know, relationship with God in terms of prayer and response. But sometimes I don't, that's not where I am. I need someone to guide me. So what I do is I go on the web. I go to a web page for the Northumbria community, and they provide for me a structure of response so that I can connect with God with the whole Northumbrian community. So it's not just an individual thing for me. They themselves are all doing morning prayer together, and I am connecting with them in terms of my response. So in a guided retreat, you are brought into a group of people, a community of people, who are encouraged to respond to God together, who are taught what I suppose used to be called the disciplines. I mean, it could be fasting, it could be solitude, it could be the reading of scripture. I mean, there are all these disciplines. The guy who was guiding me said, Trevor, you know, because of the personality you have, let's call them exercises. Because there are things that are helpful to do, and they are not ends in themselves. They're simply they're enabling us in our broken state to reconnect to God. I mean, the way I look upon it is when God created us, if you describe the biblical narrative in terms of the creation story, the world in which we lived was to be like a sort of cosmic temple. The whole creation was to be a place in which we met with God and we enjoyed God and we enjoyed each other. But once, you know, it became broken and ruptured, all of that went out of place, went out of sync. Now, we believe, for those who are Christians, this is going to be restored, ultimately, in a new heaven and a new earth. And love will be the theme, and we will be able to, you know, just enjoy each other and enjoy God without these disciplines. My expectations are that in the new creation, you know, we're not have to go, you know, on retreat. We're not going to have Bible studies. There are not going to be any preachers, which I mean, I'm going to be out of a job. But it means that what we have lost will be recovered. Now, in between, because things are completely out of sync, we are offering in retreat the opportunity for people to meet with God, to discover who they are, and to use the disciplines that have been learned from the church over hundreds of years that enable us to do this.
Trevor, what about someone who's listening who's going, okay, I've never been on a retreat. It sounds very interesting to me, but I'm not holy enough for that. I don't know my Bible. I'll be out of place. You know, that they would just feel nervous about it, thinking, oh, that's not for me because I'm just not there. What would you say to that type of person?
I would have thought this is ideal for folks who are just wondering and asking and searching. Wherever you are, God accepts us where we are. And he draws us from where we are to where we need to be. So the very fact that you're asking the question means you're on the first rung of the ladder to go on retreat and to say, yeah, come, because you won't have to be asked to do anything publicly. You're not going to be embarrassed. If you want to be quiet, you can be quiet. If you want to be on your own, you can be on your own. we are providing the structures that enable you in patterns that I hope will be beneficial.
So where would you so some people, for example, Trevor, they might be attached to a church or organisation that's organising a retreat, but other people listening mightn't be at all, or they mightn't know where to start or where to look for a retreat that might be helpful to them. What's your advice on that?
Well, of course, as the chairperson of the Lucan Centre, I am not saying the only place that you can go on retreat is the Lucan Centre, but it is a wonderful facility. It is in such close proximity to Dublin. It's only a few miles. It's just off the M50. It's a beautiful, quiet place where folks will have the opportunity to actually, engage in these moments of encounter with God. So what I'm suggesting is that, in fact, they actually go on web and look up the lucancentre.ie and see what it's like and say, does it trigger a response? Is this something I would love to do?
And presumably people can get in touch and chat to someone as well and kind of find out more, all that sort of stuff.
Now, I would say my emphasis would be that it's more valuable, and I say this not simply because this is what we're offering, that it's more valuable to go in a group. I said initially that we're so individualistic in our thinking, but we'd be made as social beings. We'd be made to interact with each other. And that is why, for example, in the church, baptism is so important, because you're baptized into a community through which together you are meant to encounter God and each other. So what you're doing at a retreat is that you're coming together with other people who will encourage you to walk with God in Jesus Christ.
Well, it's been very interesting hearing all about just the benefits of doing a retreat, and hopefully some people listening might give you some inspiration for that thing to put on your to-do list now for 2016. Reverend Trevor Morrow, thank you so much for joining us on Spirit Radio today. And just to remind our listeners, if you want to find out more about the Lucan Centre, you can go onto their website, which is lucancentre.ie.
Thanks for listening to our Spirit Radio podcast. Don't miss out. Subscribe today. Find out how at spiritradio.ie.